This election season, we've seen voter ID, cuts to early voting, and now a potentially massive purge of eligible Democratic voters. Rolling Stone reports on a Republican-orchestrated effort to compile lists of voters who they allege are registered to vote in multiple states and to purge those people from voter registration rolls. Now, not all voters are equally affected. According to Rolling Stone, the list, quote, disproportionately threatens solid Democratic constituencies, young, Black, Hispanic, and Asian American voters, with some of the biggest possible purges underway in Ohio and North Carolina, two crucial swing states with tight Senate races. And joining me now is the author of that piece, investigative journalist Greg Palast, and from New York, director of the ACLU's Voting Rights Project, Dale Ho. Thank you both for being here. And Greg, it is great to talk to you. It's been a long, long time since I've spoken to you. Back in the days when you were investigating the 2000 election and the caging and purging of voters, tell us what is going on with these latest voter purges.
We're back to the old, it's the new Jim Crow since the end of the Voting Rights Act. Donald Trump accused, he says this election's rigged because people are voting many, many times. Don't dismiss that as nut talk, as Trumpism. He's got his henchmen and Republican Party operatives in swing states, especially with swing Senate races, Ohio, Arizona, North Carolina. What they've done is they have actually said that they have lists of people who are voting twice and lists of people who are deliberately registered in two states, and they're wiping them off the voter rolls. They've kept these lists confidential because, after all, these are criminal double voters. But, you know, I'm an investigative reporter, old-fashioned. I've earned my hat. Yeah. And so I got the lists, and the lists are, there's 7 million names on the list of people who are listed as potential duplicate felon voters. And we went through the lists. I have over 1 million of the names, and it's overwhelmingly voters of color. Dig this, Joy, 1 in 7 Black voters in those 29 Republican states are on their hit list to be removed before the election. 1 in 7, and they're going to remove about 1 million people by November. They've already started, and it's hundreds of thousands of people already flushed out. You won't know until you show up at the polls. You won't know.
That is actually scary. And you've cross-checked that voter data, as you just said, Greg, and you found that only 4 voters have been charged with double voting. So this is not exactly a widespread problem they're trying to enforce. Dale, the irony of this, of course, that Steve Bannon, there were questions about whether he's double registered in California and in Florida. So it's pretty ironic that this is the tack that the Republicans are taking. If somebody shows up at the polls, Dale, in Ohio, let's say, where the Secretary of State has not been friendly to voters, let's just say, and they are on that caging list and they are said to be a double voter, what can they do?
Well, everyone under federal law is entitled at a minimum to cast a provisional ballot. That is, if the poll workers or challengers try to interfere with your voting rights, or your name, for whatever reason, ends up not being on the list of registered voters and you're denied a regular ballot, you can still cast what's called a provisional ballot under the Help America Vote Act. But what I'm really troubled by here is, everyone knows that there is not a substantial or epidemic of voter fraud. There's no problem like this sweeping the country, but we do have a very real history of people intimidating voters at the polls. The Republican National Committee is under a federal consent decree right now for engaging in voter intimidation using exactly these kinds of caging lists in New Jersey in predominantly African-American and Hispanic neighborhoods. And it's really, I think, a significant problem as we look ahead to November.
And Greg, as somebody who, as you said, has covered this same sort of tactic used over and over the years, walk us through exactly what they do. How can a party create a list that then the state, let's say the state of Ohio, has to use to purge voters?
Well, and let me tell you, the Chris Kobach, who is Trump's hitman, the guy that came up with the way for Mexico to be muscled into paying for his wall, Chris Kobach of Kansas has taken the voting rolls of 29 Republican-controlled states with their approval and mixed all the names together and said if he sees the same name in 2 different states, it must be a double voter or double registered. For example, and here's a real example, Maria Isabel Hernandez of Louisiana is supposed to be the same exact voter as Maria Cristina Hernandez of Georgia. That's what they say is a double voter. And it's only the first and last name match, if you can believe that. So who's on the list? Wong, Hernandez, Mohammed, Jackson. In fact, there are 288 James Browns who supposedly voted twice in Georgia and another state. It's just a list of common names. That's all there is to it. And when you have common names in America, you're talking about black folk and Hispanics, and especially Asians, who are now voting about 75% Democratic. This is an ethnic cleansing which has been done out of the public eye. You've had some statements by Republican operatives, like the Republican voting chief of North Carolina, the big swing state, who says she has absolute evidence that 35,000 people have voted in North Carolina and another state in the same election. She hasn't arrested one, but she's removed these people from the voter rolls. That's just, it's an old Jim Crow tactic. 100 years ago, the film Birth of a Nation, which was a Ku Klux Klan propaganda film, showed white actors in blackface casting a second ballot. Trump's charge about multiple voters, another dog whistle, is even more. It's being put into effect is the problem, as the purging is in operation as we speak.
This is really terrifying. We're going to have you guys back. I wish we had more time, but when you add to that Trump telling his supporters to, quote, watch the polls, you mix that in some states like Ohio that are open carry states, this is going to be a pretty scary process. We will have you guys back if you guys will come back so that we can keep people up to date on this. Thank you so much, reporter Greg Palast. His film, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, comes out next month. And thank you also to Dale Ho. Really appreciate you both. Wow. And after the break, thank you. The Life of Donald. I'll talk to one of the authors of a revealing new book.